Hi folks, welcome along. So I thought I would put together an updated video on my tuning for max immersion, basically how we've tuned the sim rig to be as realistic as possible, for the Lotus 49, the classic 1967 F1 car driven by Jim Clark and Graham Hill. Since I did a video back in 2022, I think it was, when we first did that, I'll put a link to that one in the description. That was really the first car that I drove with the sim rig, in anger, if you like, the first championship we did way back then. And then since that I've driven a few other things and learned a lot about how to set the rig up, about how to set the force feedback up, more importantly, and raced a few other things. And then after we did the Grand Prix Tour last season, 2023, all year, and I was looking for something different to do over the winter from 23 to 24, and ended up back at the Lotus 49. And yeah, so raced it for a few races over the kind of winter period. The plan was to have some downtime and not do too much racing over the winter, and it turned into a lot of uptime as I tried to relearn how to drive the car and things. But anyway, that story aside, this video is really taking a look at the settings that I put in that other video, and then how I've updated them for this, learning and knowing now a lot more about force feedback settings and what I want from the car, etc., and different things on the rig as well. So yeah, if you haven't seen the first video, have a look at that first to give you an overall view, because a lot of things haven't changed. And then yeah, if you've seen that, then we'll just go through some of the settings here. So we're going to look at the overall rig. Not much has changed there, to be fair, but we'll do a quick review of that. Then go into the SimiCube 2 Ultimate Wheelbase and the force feedback settings in the True Drive software. I'll put my settings up on screen. If you guys want to try it out, feel free as well. I'll try and explain some of the things that I've learned since doing it last time. Which again have helped me just to tune the car a bit better, tune the feeling a bit better, I should say. Then I'll look at some of the force feedback settings in iRacing. When I did this video back then, I didn't really understand how the settings in iRacing worked, and how they influenced the force feedback and how they should work in parallel with True Drive. So I now know a little bit more about that. So we'll look at the settings I use in there. Then we'll jump on to look at the Heusinkveld Ultimate Plus pedals. What I've done slightly differently in that from what I raced last time. There's not a huge difference, but just subtle tweaks to make it a bit more realistic, I think, as well. Not necessarily faster. We'll come to that in a second, but it's more realistic, I think. And yeah, just a little different gear layout that I use for the gearbox as well. And then we'll maybe do some helmet cam laps at the end, just to give you guys a tour of the car on track. So yeah, strap yourselves in and let's get started. So first thing to talk about is the rig itself, how I'm sitting and how everything is round about me. It hasn't really changed from the last time we drove the car. Seat is still for this car, it's in the most upright position I can put it into, so the holes at the mounting at the front are the lowest and the mounting holes at the back are the highest position. So I'm sitting as upright as I can. Just figured that was a bit more realistic for this car, the type of seating position. If you watch the Building My Virtual Race Car video series, there's some detail in there about how we put the rig together and things. So check that out if you're interested in what all the bits are, how it goes together. But that's the same. The steering wheel, obviously, we still use the old Lotus 49 Replica wheel, which is perfect. It gives you exactly the right size of wheel, the same feeling with the leather and stuff. Again, you can't really go any more realistic than that for a Lotus 49. The one change I made this season is there's an adapter here, which you can see, I used to mount the quick release straight to the wheel last time, but it was too close to the screen. The wheel was just a bit too close. I was sitting a little bit closer. It means that I had to move everything closer to when I ran with the modern car. Obviously there's a bit more gubbins at the back of the modern car. You've got the shifters and the other little adapters and things that go on, so everything was further away. And yeah, I would think I was just sitting too close to the screen previously. So having that, it's an adapter from BG Racing, aluminium, I think. Yes, I think it's made from aluminium, and it just pulls it around. I think that's a 60mm one I've got in there, and it just pulls the steering wheel closer to you, and it just means that everything else in the rig lines up better. It also helps with the gear shifter. Previously, I was again being a bit further forward when you've got into top gear, it was a bit, I was hitting the seat kind of thing behind me. But yeah, just setting that a little bit further back just means the shifter's in a more realistic position as well, and comfortable, which is good. So yeah, that's the kind of rig. Not much else to talk about there. But yeah, it's still a very comfortable place to be, and enjoyed racing it. Next, we will look at the SimUcube 2 Ultimate settings, and specifically the TrueDrive settings that I use in that. So I'll just bring TrueDrive up on screen here. Again, yep, I've got the wheel in there as before. Nothing's really changed. If we go across the TrueDrive and load the Lotus 49 settings, here we have them. So I'll make them as big as possible so you guys can hopefully see them on screen. And yeah, feel free to pause the video, take a screenshot, and try this out if you want. I'm going to take my steering wheel off because I can't see the screen with the steering wheel in position. So, how does this compare with what we ran last time? So actually, what I'll do is I'll pop this. These are the last settings I had. Screen grab of them, so I'll have that up on screen for a quick look for you. I might see if I can put them side by side, and then you can see how they compare. You see that? Okay, yeah. So obviously the ones in the middle, these are the new ones. So starting at the top, overall strength, we're up slightly at 15 Newton meters, which is 48% of the force. Again, that's the maximum force I ever want to feel from the wheel. Again, I had it at 14.1 last time, but because of some of the settings I had in iRacing, they probably weren't correct. I was kind of oversaturating the force a little bit. So now I've kind of sorted all that out, and we'll talk about iRacing settings in a minute. Yeah, 15 Newton meters is kind of the sweet spot for me. It makes it tough to drive, as you would expect these cars to be, but again, there's no downforce or anything, so it's not overly difficult to drive. But in a long corner, when you're having to load the steering up, or tracks like the Hungaroring where there was a lot of back and forth steering, it certainly gives you a workout. So that's what I run for force. The bump stop range is the same. I think I explained that. Actually, no, last time it was 900, but I think I tweaked that when I got in the car. But yeah, last time I think I explained that in the video last time, that the 413 degrees I've got in there, lock to lock, is based on in iRacing when you turn the wheel and you see where the wheels physically stop moving. So I've tuned that 1-to-1 with the simulator to make sure that I get exactly the same steering lock, and the bump stop kicks in when the simulator tells me the bump stop kicks in. SimUcube Force Reconstruction Filter. So previously this was up at 8. I've got it down at 6 now. This is basically, again, I'm not going to explain what these things mean too much. There's other videos online if you want to spend hours delving into the details of what these things are. So yeah, previously this was up higher. What this does is it takes the signal from the simulator and it kind of, yeah, as it says, reconstructs it effectively. So the signal from iRacing, I think it's 60 Hz, the force feedback in iRacing is at, which is quite slow compared to obviously what the Wheelbase can do, but simulators in general nowadays tend to be more modern sims tend to have faster up refresh rate. But the thing is that the base can deal with a lot higher fidelity than that signal. So this is how it interpolates the signal basically and adds what it thinks to try and smooth the signal. Any lower than 6, and I found a graininess in the wheel. Even just dry steering, like in the paddock or something, you can feel the wheel going just jumping a little bit as you turned it, which again, it's not realistic. In real life, everything's smooth. So 6 was as low as I could turn it down. You don't want to go too high with this because it will slow down the signal, because obviously it takes time for the wheelbase to then go into the signal and figure out, what am I going to interpolate all these points with. So the less interpolation it does, the faster the signal comes through. You don't get as much of a delay, which is good. But if you can feel a bit grainy, I find it felt sticky for me, the force feedback. So yeah, 6 is what I landed on for that. Torque bandwidth limit, unlimited. I think that's I'm not 100% on that. The kind of signal of torque, that's probably not right. Go and Google somebody else's explanation of what that is. Anyway, leave it at unlimited is my recommendation. These filters, now this is where I've changed quite a bit from last time. Last time I was at 25%. The more filtering you do, again, you're adding delay and lag into the force feedback. So I try and reduce these as much as possible to try and get more of the raw feeling of the car and not trying to over filter the signal, which again is taking away some of the feeling that you need to try and get. But I've ended up with, again, 5 in damping, because any lower and it started to feel a bit loose when you start to make movements. Felt a bit loose. Friction and inertia. Inertia is an important one to stop the oscillations that you get in the steering wheel in the straight. So if you take inertia down to 0, and friction as well, to be fair, they kind of work in harmony. You tend to find that if you go down a straight and you accelerate and you take your hands off the steering wheel starts to go out of control, that typical thing. So that is, again, you can look up exactly what it does feeling wise, but any lower than 10% on both of them, I find I was getting oscillations in the steering wheel, which are not realistic. So again, 10% was the lowest I could go to dial out those oscillations. Static force reduction, again, that's really trying to simulate. People use it for power steering and things. There's no power steering on this car anyway, so it doesn't matter. But that's really where, if you want a high impact force through the steering wheel, but you don't want as high cornering forces, you can turn that on to dial down cornering forces versus impact forces. I tend to find that impact forces are, in iRacing especially, are quite high as it is. So if anything, I would rather we had a negative value for that, so I could increase cornering forces and reduce impact forces, because they tend to be quite harsh, the impact forces in iRacing, I find. So yeah, I definitely don't want to go the other way. I want to reduce impact forces as much as possible. So I'll leave that off. Slew rate limit. Now, this is something I didn't understand previously. As you can see in the previous one, we had it off. I just didn't touch it. But effectively, it kind of clicked with me what this actually does by playing with it a little bit. And it's the slew rate is how quickly the force can change from one state to another in your steering wheel. So again, effectively, those sharp forces I'm talking about, where if you go over a curb or if you hit a curb or something, you get all of a sudden a very sharp nudge in the steering wheel. And I find, as I said, in iRacing it's quite severe, and you can get, to me it feels unrealistic how harsh it can be sometimes, going over curbs and things. So I started to reduce this, and it just takes the edge off of those forces a little bit. But I've ended up at 5.44, which again I think works well for me in this car. Again, you could spend a lot longer just fine tuning it, and I may do that for future cars. But that definitely was better than having it off. When it was off, yeah, you hit something, your hands will almost be aching at the end of a test from the impact you're getting from it. Worried about kind of white knuckle syndrome type thing. But yeah, if you drop that too low, so if you drop the slew rate limit down too low, it kind of feels like your steering's a bit mushy, and you're on top of your tires are maybe balloons or something. It kind of feels very wishy-washy. And then obviously the other extreme, it's, as I say, it's too harsh. So play with that. That really makes a good difference to the sim for me. Being able to play with that slew rate limit until you find a nice point at which you can feel the vibrations for the curbs and the curb strikes and things, but it's not overpowering. So that's a good one to play with. That's one of the main things I've learned over the past couple of years, is that's a good one to play with. Ultra low latency mode. Again, that's something. It's basically, it takes account of the latency in the simulator. I haven't shifted that from last time, 15%. I think I read in the SimuCube forums themselves that they recommend 15% for iRacing because of the type of sim it is, and because of the refresh rate, or the update rate it has for force feedback. 15% is almost ideal, so I tend to just run with that. I have played with it up and down a little bit, and to be honest, I didn't feel anything, so I just leave it at what they say to leave it at, and it's fine. These peaking and notch filter I haven't felt the need to use, so that is off. Centering spring was something that wasn't in the build last time. This is something they've added, but again, it's off because we don't need it in iRacing. These filters at the bottom, the only one that actually does anything in iRacing is the top one, the damping filter. But so I've turned it off. I'd rather keep the signal from the sim as kind of pure as possible, so I've turned that off. Again, the rest of them don't do anything in iRacing, so they're off. And the bottom filters here as well, the kind of SimuCube 2 Ultimate Early Access filters. Again, I haven't touched them. I've leave them at kind of standard values. But those are my settings. Feel free to try them out if you want to. Next, we'll jump into the sim and look at the iRacing force feedback settings, which obviously tie into this, and how I ended up with those. Let's go. So, jumped into the sim now, iRacing, and these are the force feedback settings in the sim that we use for the steering wheel. So, first thing to set is wheel force, and that matches TrueDrive. So we had 15 Newton meters in the TrueDrive software. We're now telling iRacing that, look, the steering wheel, or the wheelbase we're using has a maximum force of 15 Newton meters. So iRacing can then scale everything based on that. Max force, which I think if it says strength in yours, you click it, it changes to max force, which I tend to use. This is set a little bit through trial and error, and a little bit through using some telemetry, which I'll show you in a bit. Basically, that taking that up or down is important that you make sure you cover all the forces you want to feel in the car. If it's too low, the steering wheel is going to be very heavy, is that right? And you'll kind of just miss out on all the detail. Too high and the steering wheel will be quite light, but the details will be so small you won't feel them. So it needs to be somewhere in between. So the way I kind of ended up with 38 Newton meters is through doing some laps and then loading up telemetry and looking at what the actual torque values are. So this is some laps I did at Hungaroring, and you can see at the bottom here, you can't see the end because I'm in the way, but in fact I'll just knock myself off so you can see the whole thing. So at the bottom here you can see the steering wheel torque in Newton meters. And again, obviously, as you go around corners, left or right, it varies. These spikes here are like curb strikes and things. So this is the maximum force that we'll get. So if we're looking at that with the scale here, you can see it's 50 at the top, minus 60, but 50 to minus 50 looks about the kind of range within that. But again, things like these curb strikes are unrealistically high forces that we're getting now and again. So it doesn't so much matter if you're not capturing all those. But in general, I mean, what are we here? Constant force in turn 1, we're up about 23 Newton meters. Again, negative 22, we're up about 24 there. Negative 24, again 24. So we're kind of in the 25 Newton meter range. If I zoom in on these curb strikes, you can see we're getting up to 45. That's up to 39, 38. So we set it at 38. Now, obviously, when I was setting the torque, I've tried a few different circuits to see, what some circuits got higher or lower than others. It was actually Red Bull Ring was the first one that we raced at, and here's a trace from running at the Red Bull Ring. And again, you can see here, we've also got some curb strikes, peak forces up at 60 Newton meters, but some of these kind of constant force loads were up at 34, 35. This one, if I zoom in a little bit more, we're kind of peaking around about 34 again. So, and again, a little bit of kind of trial and error around about there to play with things. Again, there's kind of higher forces in the last corners when I'm running off circuit and things. But yeah, that's where 38 came from, was looking at different circuits and seeing what can I put on that covers most of the range without being overly high. So yeah, that's where 38 came from. So let's talk pedals. Bring my feet up on the screen so you can see them. Here are my beautiful Heusinkveld Ultimate Plus pedals. Very, very nice bits of kit. I have been very impressed with them, I have to say. And yeah, let's bring up Smart Control and have a look at the settings. So we'll start left to right. So the clutch is pretty much as it was last time. Again, the dead zone in this car, well, not the dead zone, sorry, the bite point in this car is around about there, which is output of 87%, so around about the 87% mark I found, which is about there on the pedal, so it's around about here, which is, what's that, about 75% pedal, because on the pedal, the way the pedal's designed, you can kind of feel, like in real life, you can feel the clutch engaging, and that happens around about there. So hence why the curve is a funny shape, because it allows me to be feeling the clutches biting when it's actually biting in the sim as well. So yeah, didn't change that, same as last time. The brake, still linear, still got the big dead zone at the bottom, because again, that's, to me, that's pretty soft, and then you can feel the resistance there, so that's when you want the brake to start applying. That's when it feels like you're actually pressing the brake, not just taking up the slack in the pedal. Changed the packing slightly. It was curve F from the manual, and we were one stage stiffer to curve E, simply because probably I was used to driving a stiffer pedal in the modern F1 car all the year, so went for a bit stiffer with the packing. It gives me a good feel. I was quite happy with it. And the force in kilograms, I think it was 65 last time. It's up to 67 now. That reason being that I started off with a slightly higher force, but I was struggling to slow the car down without feeling like I was having to overly press the pedal. So this felt pretty good. And also, if you look at the actual force applied by the user, when I'm actually up at 100%, it's pretty much 60 kilograms. So this is why this is 67, because I wanted the actual force I'm applying to the pedal to be 60 kilograms. I felt good. So tweaking this value obviously tweaks what a force I'm applying and what it outputs as. So 60 kilograms is 100% output there, which is good. And the throttle, slight change to that this year was that there's a slight S shape to it. Now an S shape is the kind of throttle response curve you would see from a carburetor engine, such as the kind of old Cosworth DFE that we have in the Ford Lotus 40 and the Lotus 49, I should say. So I felt that was bringing me a bit more realistic, more realism to it as to what the throttle response would actually be like in the Lotus 49. Again, caveat being I haven't ever driven one. Yeah, I think this actually made me slower, having a slightly slower throttle response earlier on. I just never quite got the immediate throttle response that I probably should have had for the car, and again I could have probably beat it back to linear, but I felt this was more realistic, so I stuck to my guns, even though it made me slightly slower. But yeah, I just had to get used to it like you would with any car. But yeah, I'm happy with that as a kind of best guess as to what it would be like to drive a Lotus 49 in real life. So those are my settings. If you guys have the same pedals, feel free to copy and paste and try it out. Right, let's move on and talk about the H shifter for a second, shall we? So just expanded the window a little bit so you can see the shifter in all its glory. Yeah, again, love this thing. Haven't changed a thing since I installed it. And again, you can watch the building my virtual race car video to see how we installed it and what settings we installed it at. But yeah, absolutely love it. Fantastic feel to the pedals, to the shifter. The only change this season is that I learned, and how I didn't learn this driving the car the first time around, is that the Lotus 49 has a dog leg layout. So whereas in a conventional gearbox, and how I drove it last year, you would go towards yourself and forward for first, and then back for second, up in the middle for third, back for fourth, then up for fifth and away. The car's got a dog leg layout, so that is typical for manual racing cars. The Lotus 79, I knew had it, so I drove that with a dog leg. It just means that first is towards you and back. And then you're up straight into the middle for second, and then that means it's straight back for third, and then up and away for fourth, and then back for fifth. So actually, it makes the reason it's used, if you don't know, is because a lot of corners, especially in this car anyway, tend to be second or third gear. So you spend a lot of time going from second to third, and having them just straight in front and behind is an easy snap to make. Whereas when you first was up there and second was here, you'd be going from second into the middle and then forward to get the third, and into the middle and back there to get second. So it makes it easier to shift between the gears that are used most of the time. You only tend to use first in the start anyway. So yeah, for realism, switch to the dogleg layout and happy days. That is everything that we tweaked on the rig to update the Lotus 49 experience for 2024. I will go and take you on some laps to end the video. Hope you enjoyed that, folks. Any questions, leave them in the comments. I will try my best to answer them and get back to you. Thanks for watching. Cheers. So yeah, welcome to the cockpit of the Lotus 49. Sitting here in the pit lane at the Hungaroring, which is the last race I did. And yeah, we're ready to go for some laps. The sim is all set up as per all the settings I've just been through with you guys, so let's see how it looks on track. We apology about the mirrors being blacked out. I'm still waiting for iRacing to fix the issue I'm having where if I put cockpit mirrors on, the sim crashes. So yeah, apologies for the lack of immersion there. But other than that, it's still good fun. So let's start the car, shall we? And have a look. I do like the engine in the Lotus 49. So clutch in first gear, which I remember is back the way in the shifter. And let's go, let's get the revs up. First corner here, very tight. So again, nice. I'm feeling the vibration for the curb. feeling the load through the steering wheel. Feel the back getting a bit loose sometimes. Yeah, enough load in there that you can feel it. And you certainly feel the curves, but it's not too harsh. You know, I feel like I'm going over the curves. And I can feel the curves through the tyres, but my hands aren't being destroyed by the harshness of it all. Hungaroring, a very technical circuit. This middle section in particular, and this car is constantly turning one way, turning the other way. But it is fun. Oh, mistimed my throttle blip there. Let's try and some heat in these tyres. See what the car can do. Yeah. Woohoo! Back end does like to come around. Spinning up the rears, a bit impatient on the throttle. Yeah, it's a great car. I do like driving it, and the feeling of having to wrestle the thing with the manual gears and the constantly sliding nature of everything is rewarding when you get it right, and frustrating when you don't. But that's part of the fun, you know? Anyway, we'll pull up the pits after this lap, I think. Woo! And in the broadcast race, you had actually finished third. It was a tough race, actually. I had to spend all of it looking in my mirrors, pretty much. But thanks to some incidents ahead, we finished third, which is not bad. Was running second for most of it, but hey ho. And there we go, that is some laps of the Hungaroring in the beautiful Lotus 49 F1 car. Nothing quite like it on the simulator, I have to say. And the way we've dialed the sim in, really, yeah, really nice. I may as well pull it to my mechanic. And yeah, it's really, it's such an awesome car to drive this, especially when the simulator's set correctly. So, love it. I hope you guys find that useful, and I will see you next time.